All right, everybody, welcome back. We're diving deep today, folks. Bitcoin, buy or sell? That's the question.
$1 million question, right?
Yeah. And to get to the bottom of this, we've got some really interesting insights to dig into from a recent crypto podcast. They really break down market trends, all the technical analysis stuff, Bitcoin halving events, all that. And I think it'll give us a better idea of where things might be headed. So before we get too far, I think it helps to just sort of set the stage.
Yeah.
You
The
know,
lay of the land.
exactly. So according to the podcast we're looking at right now, Bitcoin is sitting at, let me see, $24,800.
Okay.
Market cap is, wow, $480 billion.
Wealthy.
That's a lot of zeros. And 24-hour trading volume, about $13 billion. So, it's moving.
It's moving, that's for sure.
It's been on a bit of an upswing lately, actually.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
The podcast, they point to a few things driving this recent little surge. We've got the ETF approvals happening. The Bitcoin halving event, which we'll get into a little bit later, is on the horizon.
Right.
And then, of course, the macroeconomic trends, always.
But the macro picture always looms large, yeah.
Always. Listener, does anything here surprise you? Big numbers, or maybe something else catches your eye?
Well, for me, I'm always interested in how these different forces interact. You've got short-term news like ETF approvals, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Then you've got the long-term play with the halving, and of course the economy kind of sits over all of it, like a big question mark.
Yeah. And that's why I'm really glad that this podcast, digs into the technical analysis because it helps us get a feel for where the market sentiment is right now.
Right now. Exactly.
So they talk about, support levels specifically around $22,000.
Okay. So that's kind of a floor that we're watching.
Yeah, like a safety net almost.
Yeah.
If Bitcoin dips, but then it holds steady around that $22,000 mark, well, that might signal a bounce back is coming.
Right. Buyers stepping in saying, hey, this is a good price.
Exactly. But then we also have to look at the resistance levels, right? The ceiling. And according to the podcast, that's sitting around $25,000.
So that's the hurdle we got to clear.
If Bitcoin can break through that $25,000 resistance, boy, we could be looking at a rally, maybe even up to $30,000.
That'd be something.
Right. And then there's, of course, the moving averages. Those are always a big deal.
Bread and butter of technical analysis.
Yeah. The podcast specifically mentions the 50-day and the 200-day moving averages. And, trading above that 200-day moving average, that's generally seen as a really bullish sign. So I'm curious, listener, have you ever used these technical indicators? What's been your experience with them?
I think moving averages are so interesting because, well, they can almost become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, interesting.
When the price crosses a key moving average, it can trigger a wave of buy or sell orders, which actually just amplifies the trend even more.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So the podcast also brings up the RSI, Relative Strength Index. They say it's at 60 right now.
Okay. So that gives us an idea if Bitcoin is overbought or oversold, right?
Okay.
Although we always want to remember, RSI by itself, it's not the whole picture.
Of course not, yeah.
All right. We need to look at it in context, consider other indicators, like an RSI of 60 during a big upswing might not be a red flag.
Right.
But the same RSI when the market's just kind of flatlining, well, that might be a different story.
That's a great point, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've covered all these technical indicators, but let's not forget the fundamentals, the things driving Bitcoin's price over the long haul.
The big picture.
And that brings us to this kind of mystery the podcast throws at us. Bitcoin halving. They mentioned it's either, coming up soon or it just happened, but they don't give us any dates.
Okay. So for our listener who might not know, what is a halving event?
Yeah, so a halving event is basically when the reward for mining new Bitcoins, those people with the computers solving complex math problems,
Right.
it gets cut in half.
Yeah.
It happens about every 4 years. And historically, it's been a big deal.
Huge.
Like major price surges have happened around halving events.
Because it directly impacts the supply.
Exactly.
Less Bitcoin coming into the market, but demand's still there. So you can see how that would push the price up.
It's like a built-in scarcity mechanism. And if you look back at the history, Bitcoin's price tends to, really jump in those months leading up to and following a halving event. So, listener, I highly recommend you do some digging. Find out when that next halving is supposed to happen.
Yeah, crucial information if you're thinking about buying or selling.
Absolutely.
It's also interesting to think about, market awareness. People know the halving is coming, and that can actually have an effect on the price even before the event
Oh,
happens.
interesting. Like people anticipating the change.
Exactly.
That happens.
Speculation, maybe some early investment activity,
Hmm.
all pushing the price up.
Wow. So to sum it all up, we've got these technical indicators suggesting a potential bounce back or maybe even a rally,
Right.
depending on those support and resistance levels.
Right.
And then we have this fundamental factor of the halving event, which could really inject some upward momentum into the market.
Yeah.
It's a lot to consider. Listener, this is just the starting point, okay?
Please.
Keep doing your research, explore those halving dates.
Think about your own goals as an investor, too. What level of risk are you comfortable with?
Exactly.
Because that's the other thing about Bitcoin. It's not just about buying and selling. It's about understanding this technology, this whole new way of thinking about money.
Yeah.
And this deep dive, I think it's a great first step on that journey.